Yeah,
There we
mine's-
go.
Yeah,
That
All
must be
right,
what it
thank you.
is.
Are we good, Tucker? Okay, all right. Let me please call a meeting to order. Chris, please do the roll. I'll bury it now. I have to lay hand it down.
everybody gave me handouts here. Here it is. I have it. All right. Board of Finance meeting, November 11th, 2025. Deanna Carlson.
Here.
Todd Levieri.
Here.
Michael Chen.
Here.
Chris Labrise is here. Victor Alvarez.
Here.
Maria Weingarten. Robert Hamill.
Here.
James Yao.
Here.
Nicholas Matrakis. Jan Schaefer.
Here.
Steve Doka.
Here.
Alan Bedaines.
Here.
We have a full house.
All right, excellent. I do need a motion to approve the minutes from our October 14th meeting. Motion to approve the minutes. Second? All in favor?
Joka.
Victor seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. Okay, we will do a swap with the agenda. We're going to move the investment performance overview and update up. And then we'll have facilities follow that. So the floor is yours. Thank you for coming. Appreciate the hard work and the effort and look forward to the summary.
So I'll get us started here. Thank you again for having us. I will start on page 6 of the report to give an overview of the pension plan and where we stand through the end of September of 2025. I think the committee, alongside Justin, did a lot of good work in setting the overall, making some tweaks in the overall asset allocation, long-term asset allocation for the pension plan. So if you look at that top box on page 6, we have the actual asset allocation of the pension plan as of March of 2025. We made some tweaks to the portfolio in May of 2025 and resulting in what you see on the far right-hand column, your ending asset allocation as of September of 2025. So adding a bit more, I think largely speaking, a bit more broadly, a bit more diversification within the portfolio, adding to areas like emerging, a smaller allocation to emerging markets, global equities, real assets in the form of REITs in the portfolio, and also listed infrastructure. How does that translate, or how has that translated in terms of portfolio performance? Third quarter, these are unannualized numbers for the pension plan. This is a net return on assets of 5.23% versus our benchmark at 5.33%. We started working with the town at July 2nd of 2024. So that annualized since inception number there you see is an annualized since inception return since we started working with the town, 14.49% versus our benchmarks at 14.36%. Over the past 1 year, some good relative performance as well, 12.1% versus our benchmark at 11.88%. Third quarter, just to give a broad overview of the pension plan, began with a market value of $183.6 million. You had inflows and outflows out of the plan, but when you sum those all up on a net basis, $1.6 million of net outflows, resulting on so how does that investment return translate into dollars? A $9.6 million gain on the portfolio, with an ending market value of $191 million, almost $191.6 million through the end of September 2025. So you made some of those moves to broadly diversify the portfolio in a more intentional way. How has that played out year to date? If you look at page 7, these are year to date market returns. International equities really flipped from what we've seen over the past 3-4 years. If you look at stock market returns, broad stock market returns over the past several years, U.S. equities have certainly led the way from a return standpoint. That's changed over the past 9 months through the year. So adding that a bit more broader diversification has certainly benefited the portfolio. U.S. equities returned 14.6% return, global real estate 11.3%, and aggregate bonds 6.1%. So I think when we take a look at the market and as things stand today, I mean, the U.S. 14.6 return for the for the first 9 months of the year. Pretty resilient economic fundamentals as we see them in the U.S. If you were to look at our recessionary probabilities several quarters ago, they would have been a bit higher than they are today. You see the bear market case recession probabilities at around 25%. I think largely speaking, we're anticipating with a lot of resiliency in the economy right now, anticipating a soft landing for the U.S. economy. Anything to add, Justin, on the pension?
So I'll just mention, we did the full strategic review where we did the asset liability forecasting, and here you all approved that updated allocation. We're comfortable with the diversification rather than the previous implementation of just 3 passive funds. We now have explicit targets for U.S. small cap emerging markets and global equity, and also real asset exposure, which I think is important for diversification. You're able to get real estate and infrastructure exposure, but in a daily liquid way. And we're big believers in that, and that's 4% allocation to both the REITs and the listed infrastructure. So we will refresh our deep dive analysis. It's about a 3-year cycle that we do that on. We'll do it again the year after next, and make sure that everything's closely aligned with what your long-term objectives are with this pension plan.
I have a question. What's our exposure to AI stocks in the portfolio?
AI stocks like NVIDIA and so forth. Well, your U.S. large cap is passive right now, so you would have the same as the global market cap indicates. We can get you exact percentages if you want, but it's a pretty sizable. There's a lot of concentration in those in like NVIDIA in particular. Microsoft is big into it right now. Meta, obviously, a lot of those Magnificent Seven stocks are heavy into AI.
But our U.S. equity exposure is down through the new policy, so it's 33% times that passive percentage. So it's not as scary as it might sound.
Yeah, that's a good point. You've diversified away from a lot of that. You took a lot of that U.S. large cap equity exposure where the entire Mag 7 lives, and you're putting some of it into real estate, some of it into listed infrastructure, some of it into global equity. So you've taken good steps since May to diversify away from it.
Okay, thanks.
What's driving the international equities high return?
Year to date?
Well, yeah, it's 25.1%. Like, was that like a region that's doing so well?
International equities had much more attractive PE ratios to start the year. And so we kind of had seen it as an opportunity for a while, and we're seeing that. Yeah, we're now seeing that play out for this year.
Is there a specific industry or country or region that's driving that growth?
I think we actually don't. We have
But you have market performance, and you have these are in dollars, right? So you've got 2 components.
Oh, it's the currency.
It's dual-sided, right? I mean, there's page 12 in the presentation has a representation of a select group of countries all throughout the world. So not only are international equities doing well in their own right, non-US equities, but also the effects of currency the past 5-6 years or so has been an environment where the dollar has significantly strengthened against a lot of major currencies. We've seen the opposite of that occur through the first 9 months of the year. The dollar, if you look at it on like a purchasing power parity basis on a lot of other major currencies, still is expensive. So we're actually of the view that there is still more room to run in terms of the dollar weakening. But yes, it's kind of a dual-headed issue of international equities doing well in their own right, but then currency weakening being a tailwind to international returns. So that's an update on the pension plan. So the same.
Sorry, this is just optically looks like a relatively big shift in asset allocation. Do we do that routinely? I mean, quarterly, or is this
No.
really a pretty significant shift?
Yeah, and So at the start of our relationship, we did a study to make sure to kind of align it with, with our best practices, what we're seeing in the market and so forth. We anticipate doing a full review like that every 3 years, unless there's a significant event that maybe a change in benefits or something like that. But across our client base, it's usually about every 3 years that we do it. A deep
Like
dive.
a once in 3 year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Alan,
15 months ago.
right when I was elected the first time, our prior pension manager let us know that they would no longer be in the business of running municipal pension business. So we went out for an RFP, and Russell was the winner of that. And then as part of that process, they made some recommendations to the pension, to the RPAC and about how they would recommend realigning our portfolio a little bit. So
we probably won't do a meaningful realignment for a couple more years then.
Right.
We're going with this.
Yeah, and that was approved. The recommendation was made to us in July. I think we approved it in September.
It was approved in May. Yeah. And we'd had a couple, conversations before that as
Yeah,
well.
we deferred it at least once.
Right,
We
yeah.
deferred it once, because of timing on meetings, and then
Right.
we approved it at the May meeting.
The May meeting, it was
So it was
implemented
implemented.
the month later. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
part.
Yeah.
So this was all part of the migration from one set of managers to another, and was in line with making it match the recommendations of Russell.
We had no international prior. It
Yeah,
was
well,
literally
that's true.
65,
Yeah.
30. It was the
We
most
didn't
simple
have that.
thing,
We-
which is fine, but
We had no
it's
real
time to
assets or
change.
anything.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So is
The,
it discretionary or non-discretionary?
The allocation is non-discretionary, meaning we're bound to keep it within the targets that you have approved.
They have a rebalance.
Plus minus
methodology.
2%
Yeah.
on rebalance.
so those will be the
Targets.
investment buckets that we'll have for the foreseeable future. We will discuss them at every
Meeting.
pension committee meeting, but unless we make the next time we'll have a serious deep dive will be in 2 years from now.
That's right. That's right. Now, if we're happy to do an interim analysis if needed, if there's something of particular interest, my team's happy to run that for you, but normal cycle is 3 years.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I think it's also good to add that we take in actuarial data more often than every 3 years. So as often as we can get updated cash flows and assumptions for the plan, we would take them and update them in our systems to make sure that it wouldn't necessitate any asset allocation changes or recommendations on our end.
We have no reason to think that there would be in the next year or two, but yeah, it's good to keep on top of.
Other comments that you wanted to specifically hit? And I asked the committee, other thoughts or feedback from you in terms of what you saw or where we're headed? Any other kind of
No, I
points of?
think our impression at the committee level was that the reallocation was in fact done properly and has performed very well right from the beginning. So I think we're very comfortable with the asset allocation as it is now.
Lucky and good.
Yeah, lucky and good. Luck
Helps to be
luck
lucky.
counts for a lot. in the world. But yeah, but so far so good. So the strong performance though does add to one of the big benefits that we have, which is probably what you want to touch on.
Well, I wanted to go to page 40 because it has your high-level observations and just on a couple of the basic metrics, the discount rate, the OPEB and pension plan funded levels, thoughts, reactions, comments, just because we're working together and we don't see pensions as just a contractual obligation. We see it as a moral obligation and we take it pretty seriously.
Yeah.
And we're proud that we're overfunded on the pension from an actuarial basis. And on the OPEB, I think when I started, I don't even remember now. I would have said we were in the 60s or 70s. And the market has been a friend, obviously, but now at 90, that's about as healthy of an, I mean, we're aware of. So it would be just your thoughts and observations would be helpful, particularly on the discount rate, because we took that down as well to be more conservative.
Thing to do. The 6.625% is a reasonable place, highly justifiable place to be for expected return on assets. Overfunded position is also prudent. The plan is partially closed right now, and so I would expect that funded status to continue to go up. And the OPEB is on a trajectory to become fully funded as well.
Good.
I'm interested in seeing the evaluation report, which I'm sure I'll get in the near future, which will likely show that these funded levels are as good as they are now, maybe a little better.
Okay.
But yes, that's something that I like looking at the valuation reports each year just to make sure that I have a good sense for the current funded position.
Comments, questions from the board? Bob, you good?
No, I think it's great.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you both.
All right.
Thanks for your help. Thanks for your input. Stay lucky.
Stay.
It helps.
All right, safe travels.
Yeah, safe travels.
Safe travels.
Okay, Dr. Lutzy. Tucker, does Brian have one of these? Yeah, okay. Thank you and welcome. Let me, if you don't mind, I'm going to just tee this up when you're ready. Okay, so you may have heard there's some discussion about a massive investment in the infrastructure of our schools. Obviously, this is something that has been, this just didn't pop up on last month. It's been something that I know the superintendent and the entire Board of Ed and team have been thinking about for several months. So I invited Brian here today to what I will call our initial meeting on this. We have not met, we haven't spoken about this, we haven't seen any data, haven't seen any information. And so I asked that we get it clean. Where are we? What are you thinking? And in preparation of that, we asked for 3 scenarios. Chris and I met 6 or 7 weeks ago. I'll call it a do nothing scenario, a expand the current infrastructure but don't add a new building scenario, and a 3rd scenario of this 4th school. I'm sorry, I have something in my throat. And so I haven't seen what you've presented, what you're going to present. So I think we're probably done along those lines of what.
We're getting there.
You're getting there. Yeah. Okay.
think-
All right.
yeah.
Well, again, this is an initial meeting. We have a long way to go to have a conversation about funding anything. So I just want to make that crystal clear. One of the things that we did is we grabbed really in preparation for the budget meeting, but in February, but it timed out perfectly to pull together 2 pieces of data. One, and this piece of paper you should have in front of you is a copy of it copy was put here on your place. So you should have it from your tablets. 2 things. The enrollment by year since 2005. And if you're looking at this graph, you can see it's the red dots across the middle. Hovering right around 4,000 plus or minus 100 or so over the 21 years of the data. And then from 2011, straight line of actual budget numbers, operating in health, not no debt, no capital, right? And doesn't include capital. So just to be clear, since 2011, it was 71 million, and this year's 113, again, without any capital. And just to put it out there, we will over the budget season, just get smooth this line out a little bit on the budget. We'll have it, kind of inflation based and have some other metrics and so forth. But just as a starting point, the budget line is less interesting today. I think for this discussion, it's not less interesting, but for this discussion, it was the student enrollment data over the 21 years. That was, I think, important for us to keep an eye on as we think about this conversation. So we could hold that in your back pocket, and I would say over to you, and then we'll kind of enhance this version 1.0 of this as we work together for the budget. Yeah, perfect.
It's absolutely the perfect introduction because I see this the same way as the start of an ongoing dialogue between the Board of Education, the Board of Finance, and the community. The initial goal was to come with some scenarios and some costs. That was a conversation we had back in September. The costs aren't ready, to be fair. You know, I had a meeting just today with the group who's been doing a facilities, a condition assessment. They will be ready to present that to the Board of Education on Monday night. I've asked them to go so far as to even develop some numbers around per square foot costs and other things. And that's the facilities condition assessment is just the roll forward number. Right. So what if nothing else were to change? So that one scenario, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So there are more conversations ahead. There'll be more data to share. And certainly tonight is really sort of laying the groundwork for that. And I'm so glad, Todd, you started with the focus on enrollment because that is really what drives this conversation and what I think are the right entry point. And as you'll see in the pages ahead, I'm going to spend a little bit of time just walking through the projections and the modeling and how those are developed, because I think it's important to understand. And as I talk about it a little bit, I think that it'll be clear why. Again, I want to say thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the time. I will move as quickly as I can.
$300 million, you know, so this gets our attention. Yeah.
And understood. And I will share with you, this is not the first time I've seen a very similar graph like this. I just finished a program in Georgetown called Edunomics, where they look at economics and education and sort of melding the two. And I wanted to participate in that program to learn more about ways to represent data, to look at trends over time, to talk about per student analyses, looking at student enrollment, staffing, and costs, and the intersection of those three over time. So this is an excellent visual, and I think we will work together to refine this as we approach this year's budget process, because I think there's a staffing number that can also be rolled into these data that could be very interesting to see when programmatically and otherwise. So look forward to those conversations. And I always enjoy the time I spend with the Board of Finance because I always learn so much. Thank you. So tonight, briefly, we'll go through some enrollment trends and just again, help talk through how those are developed and the challenges that we face when we look at our projections going forward. Look a little bit at, talk about our facilities as they exist today, and maybe dispel some of the, I don't want to say some of the misunderstandings that might be out there around our facilities and our capacities and how we're using the space. And then outline what those scenarios are and just a back and forth conversation. And those that know me well know that if there are any questions along the way, feel free to interrupt. I don't go from script. I've practiced plenty, but I'm happy to stop and answer questions in the moment as we go. But let's start with a historical look before we look at the projections, because I want to, again, walk through that briefly. And I do have a couple of extra slides that are not in the packet because it just would have been duplicative to make the copies as we go through. This one I think you do have. And these data in front of you, that's the historical enrollment by grade that we look at and NASDAQ polls. And these are all actual data points, right? So this is what the enrollment was. But I want to go closer into a couple of specific numbers. If that's not clear, if you can look on your slides at that page that I was just on, which is the historical enrollment, and we're just looking at the top row where it says birth year 2010. The number is 142, and then it says school year 15-16. And then go to K, it says 285. Okay. So the most difficult grade to project is your kindergarten every single year. We just don't know how many we're going to have in K until they're actually here. Once they're in the system, we're pretty accurate in the plus the gives or puts or takes that happen throughout the course of the 11 more years as they go through the 12 years. But that kindergarten number is a challenge. So what this tells you is that in 2010, there were 142 children born to parents, to mothers that live in New Canaan. Okay. And they get that information from the state, and it's accurate. They look at the calendar year and they get that and they vet it through. And then 5 years later, in 15-16, that 142 births materialized into 285 children who registered for kindergarten. Okay. And that delta between is the in-migration. And over the course of those 5 years of families that have come in that have had that children that age, right? So that's in 2010, which led to 2015-16. In 2011, there were 174 births in New Canaan to mothers in New Canaan. That 174 births yielded 273 kindergarten students. So we had a higher kindergarten the year before with 142 births yielding 285 versus the 174 yielding 273. So that's one of the challenges here, because so we look at this over time, and the demographers look at this over time, and they develop the birth decay ratio, which I'll talk about in a moment. But I also want you to just take a look and see that in the 15-16 kindergarten cohort, that was 285 in 15-16, grew into 299 the next year in first grade. You see how that works as you go diagonally down, right? So again, that's a product of what we call in-migration. If that number went down, it would be net out-migration. We typically have net in-migration throughout the grades as the kids move through our system K through 12. We have a slight drop from 8 to 9, and then that tends to recover as they go through the rest of the grades. So just to do it one more time. In 2012, there were 142 births, again, similarly identical to 2010. Those yielded 276 kindergartners 5 years later in 2017-18. So the 142 births yielded more kindergartners than the 174 births did 5 years later at 273. See how that works? Yep. And then you continue to go diagonally. So that original cohort in 2015-16 of 285 jumped to 299 in first grade and then went to 316 in second grade. And again, that's the in-migration that's happening as families move in. So those might be families where their kids started kindergarten, first grade somewhere else, and then they move into town with their children and family, and they enroll their kids into school. Right? Again, that's net in-migration. So what we have is this birth decay ratio, because once the kids are in the system, again, we're pretty consistent, maybe a student or two here or there in the grades. The challenge really for us in the elementary is where they're going to be more than the total number. Will they be at east, south, or west versus sort of that overall number in those elementary grades once they're in the system. But the birth decay is where we spend a lot of time, because that birth decay ratio really is the best predictor that, or at least is the predictor that the demographers use to determine sort of what they're projecting that kindergarten number to be. If they get that right, then the rest will flow. If they're off, then there are challenges, right, as we go. So we go back. So if this is again, the birth decay ratio in this graphic. That bottom bluish line are births 5 years earlier than the kindergarten enrollment up above in that greenish line, right? So we talked about the 15-16, there were 142 and there were 285 registrants. And you can go all the way back. They track these data all the way back 40 years plus, right? We look at it. What they use is a 5-year trend on this, okay, as they look back. And you can see the variation. Sometimes the births are higher and the enrollment comes down a little bit. Sometimes the births are lower and the enrollment jumps up. Sometimes they're the same. Like in 2014, we had about the same number of births, but we had over 300 kindergartners come in. So it's challenging. It's difficult to project and predict, but they do the best they can based on those numbers.
What is the average ratio? I don't see it. I can't see it on the
average ratio over the last 5 years has run at about a 2, 198, give or take, 1.98. So you take your number of births, multiply it by that factor.
Almost 2.
Almost
2.
Okay. So Brian, can you this data ends at 2020 or the birth year at 2020?
Correct.
So I guess, and I think it's come up in some of your meetings as well, but so that's a COVID year. And now, I think there's a belief that lots of people are moving out earlier. So, that multiplier that, we have historic.
So this is all known. These data exist. This is not projection. This is all historical.
Okay.
We'll get to the projection because that's exactly why I want to take the time to walk through this, because you'll, if nothing else, understand my gray hair. So you're right. 2020 births were this year's cohort of kids. And if you look, the births went down a little bit, right? Back, they were up last year a little bit, went down just a little bit, but yet our enrollment jumped up. So NASDAQ missed our enrollment this year by about 20 kids, give or take. In kindergarten, they were about 20 kids lower than what actually came, okay? Which sort of inched that factor up because they use a 5-year rolling average. So each year they'll adjust. Now, we wanted to look at this to see how accurate have they been 1 year out. And we put this table together, which I find interesting. So across the top row here goes back 11 years, right? So we go with the 2014-15 year. So in 2013, they projected that there'd be 258 children in kindergarten. And the actual in that year, the 14-15, was 302. So they were low by 44 kids, which is a significant amount because that's a couple of class, that could be three teachers, 3 classrooms that we need at 44. Again, depending upon where the kids are distributed across the 3 schools. In 2015, so it would have been in October of 2014 that they're projecting the school year 15-16. So there they projected 304 and they were 19 high and the kids came in at 285, right? So because it's a 5-year rolling average, it does self-correct. Sometimes it can overcorrect here and there, right? So, but I wanted to just get a snapshot of what in the 10 years, 1 year out, how accurate have they been? So we ran through again, these 11 years and they projected 3,285 kids. 3,324 actually came in. So they were within 39 kids over those 11 years when they were projecting 1 year out. Again, there were some misses up to, that 24% low, and they were 16% over, right? So there was variation there, but over time, because the number self-corrects and as you look at the flow of it. So just nothing is definitive when you're doing this work, unfortunately, but it's just another data point that I think is important to look at.
And if you did a K to 5 ratio and a 5 to 12 ratio, it's almost 1. In other words, there's not a jump. You don't have when you have the cohort of the 5th grade.
Yep, go ahead.
And whatever those numbers are, if I'm just eyeballing them, they're almost within 10 or 15 students of what the 12th grade is.
Sure.
And K is
Because
about the same as 5th. So they stay in the system once that first jump happens.
they stay in the system
Yeah.
and we tend to
Okay.
pick up a couple of kids like
Oh,
that
sure.
K to
I see
first
that.
grade jump, and then it gets a little smaller here and there.
I see
The
that.
only grades we really, then that's actually the next piece, right? So if you go to that next page that you have.
Well, if they do, hold on.
Seven-
If they do, looking at the difference between the actual and the projected, and you said you do a 5-year average. So the first
They do,
5
yes.
years, they're off by 61 kids. You had 61 fewer kids than they projected.
In this chart, this table here?
Yeah.
So that's not a 5, and nothing's 5 years out on that table. It's just what they projected the year before.
Oh.
Right, so. Because really, you're right. If you go out, say 5 years, those are kids that haven't been born yet. We're doing projections that go out 10 years. Those are kids that haven't been born yet to couples who haven't met yet, right? So we want to be really careful about how far out we take these. So that's where I thought, let's try to be precise, or at least as close as we can to it. And I do think there could be some interesting data that would emerge if we looked at 2 years and 3 years, and we'll continue doing the analyses.
Yeah, the point is that over time, you would think it tends to even out.
Right. The projections?
Yeah. So you don't have this big buildup of students.
This is all historical.
Yeah.
Right. And the projections, right, we're within 39 is what this is telling you, right? So over these 11 years, when you're just looking 1 year out, that the methodology sort of self-corrects on that birth decay over time, even if they miss a year, then the next year, because they missed, it brings down the ratio or up the ratio in order to.
That's very good.
To self-correct.
1%, very.
I don't feel like that's a really relevant number though, because that's the kindergarten enrollment and
Right.
and it's wildly divergent every year. I mean, it's 17 up, 6 down, 13 up. So I get it. If you want to, as we've talked about, data can be used any way you want. It mischaracterizes that you're only 1% over when really every year is wildly divergent from the projection. You have 8%,
Every year's not wildly, but every year
24%.
they don't get it right in any one given year, right? Some years they're above, some years they're below.
Right. I mean, you have
Agreed,
24% off,
Right.
16% off. So this smooths like just, I don't know what you're really actually saying here when it's only 1% off.
We're saying is that while it could be
I think you're saying over
Incorrect
time,
in
it's
a
very
given year.
accurate.
right, it can be
That-
incorrect
I
in a
think what
given
he said-
year over
Or-
time,
or-
because it
I was gonna
adjusts
say, it's a high
annually.
standard
You
deviation.
see, we'll all say what we think you're saying. You say,
Or over time.
That's
There's
another
very little
point that
difference.
I am working to make, that
right.
while we, this is the methodology that's used to make these projections. If we
That's
could
the
sit
point.
here and
that's the
say,
point.
well, they're right every time, I wish we could say that. That would make my life look quite a bit easier.
Yeah, but over the 11 years, there's very little difference.
But over the course of, over the trend over time.
Yeah.
Right, it has,
There's great stability.
You do wonder whether the next
But-
11 years.
it'll be annually adjusted, correct? So,
Since you,
I
well,
think-
hang on, before you go,
Well,
you,
you'd
since
have
you,
to-
you
you'd
put the
have to-
slide up, maybe go
you'd
back
have
to
to-
that historical enrollment by grade.
Big standard deviation.
That,
do this one.
nobody can read that, but let me, but no,
the
hang on,
standard
let me-
Deviation is not
hey, guys,
going in one direction or the other. It's steady.
here's the question. You got it up there. If I look at the school year 2016, 2017, 4,210, I think that's the peak. It's been on a steady decline every year until this year, down 250 students. That's kind of how we look at it. I shouldn't say we. That's one way to look at it, which is the enrollment has literally been declining for 9 years in total. Now, there's more in the 3rd grade, less in the 11th grade, and I got that. But at the end of the day, we have a footprint of a facility that actually has 250 fewer students in it than it did 9 years ago. That to me is one of the things we have to really understand why we would invest in growth. If that's that is not the trend,
Right.
what you described, that's real and happens.
This is all,
So
this is historical.
now let's get
correct.
into the, I hear
Yep,
you, but
yep.
that's 200, you got 250 you can make up and you're back to where you were just 10 years ago. That's a lot.
Should also buy us some time before having to
Yeah.
write a 300 million.
Well, there's that aspect of it as well. So I
To
don't
see
want
it
to
happen,
miss
but-
that pretty important big picture before we get into I know you want to get the projections going. You have to ground us in how the math is for the projections. And we get that.
I'm grateful. I know you do. And so the reason I put this up is just to highlight sort of that in-migration or out-migration to the grades, right? So that 285 in kindergarten goes to 299, 316, 315, 323, and you can, follow it diagonally along. Now, when we're looking at, because of the high percentage of students that stay in the system once they're here, really, when we look at enrollment shifts for us, right, it really means that we're graduating a class that's larger than the kindergarten class that's coming in, right? So even if you look back at these declines, you're looking at, you can really pick a grade.
Can I just interrupt? I just have one quick question, Brian.
Come
I'm looking at your 1st grade class in 2015 to 2016 of 321, right?
Yep.
If you follow that down, that 321 declines to 298. So that's
Yep.
decline. That's exact opposite. If you follow a different year. So I wouldn't just look at the yellow line. If you look at other diagonals, they don't always go up, they go down, for example, in that case.
Sure, and
321 goes down
that
to
drop you
298.
see occurred in that 8th grade was 331, and the 9th grade was 306.
Right.
And that was in the 23-24 year. Right, so that grade, as it moved through from 1 to 8, was 331 in 8th grade, and then for whatever reason, it dropped down to 306 in 9th grade.
Right.
But the grade that's highlighted, only highlighted because it was K to begin, was 318 and moved up to 323 in 9th grade. Right, so it is, again, we're looking at trends over time. It's one of the reasons why they don't take any one year and they look at 3 or 5 years. And really, just like they do the birth decay factor, they do a similar ratio from in or out migration grade to grade in order to develop the projections. And they'll look 3 and 5 years. And so back years ago, we're looking at the SACS project. There were questions around the enrollment. So I reverse engineered to understand how it all works. Because trust me, as a superintendent, I am certainly not a demographer. But it's important to
my only point is if you look at different diagonals, you have either declining or increasing over time.
we do tend to stay the same or increase slightly grade to grade. And there does tend to be an increase certainly from K to 1. I think that's pretty consistent through those grades. And then, again, it can be those transition years. Sometimes it's the 4th to 5th grade might come down a little bit, and the 8th to 9th grade may come down a little bit.
Looks like 7th to 8th, not a ton, but in the many years, even between 7th and 8th, you're seeing.
Yeah, a little bit.
Very small diminution
Yep,
to start, and which is interesting.
a
'cause
student
it's-
here, a student there.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. So, yeah, so again, the enrollment decrease we're talking about tends to be the senior class is larger than the incoming kindergarten class. So as that class graduates, those numbers come down.
Yeah. No, I'm just looking at other one. For example, if you look at the fourth grade, starting in the fourth grade, 336. Then you go to 331, 337, 330, 327, 330, 320, 315, 310. There seems to be a decline. So again, I look at this chart quickly and look like there's ones that go up, but there's several that go down as well. So I really don't get a sense of it. They always go up all the time, is all I'm saying.
Sure. Yep, that's right.
I think the dangerous thing is when you show a pack of numbers to a bunch of finance people,
Yeah.
we can spend hours on it. But I mean, the most interesting point is what Todd said, we're down 250 over 10 years.
Right.
Why? You know, I mean, is there an?
It's really that what the driver is the smaller kindergarten versus the larger senior classes graduating. Right. So it's
Well, I mean,
moved
that's-
through the
no,
grades.
No, those are just
Um,
numbers.
The
Yeah,
overall
it's-
trend is
it's-
we're down 250
yeah, it's the
in
birth
total
rate decline.
enrollment in the school district over
Mhm.
10 years.
Coming up, and not with 3 kids, they're coming up with 2. Maybe only one.
Well, yeah, if you look at the births that are here, right, that's fine.
I was just trying to say that
Well, the
the
whole
system,
Western civilization has a birth problem.
we know the system has room for another 250.
Yeah. as
Just going
is.
back to that level, that's all, one of the things I was just trying to point out.
Sure.
And maybe more, I have no idea, but
That's 10
just,
classrooms.
But that's the whole.
More.
All right, so let's get to the projections,
Now we're going into a baby boom.
right? Because I do want, before I go off this slide, take a look at the births. And you see that the high in this last 10-year period was 174 and more, and then the low was what, around 142, 137, 130, give or take. And so you're in about that range on those births going back the last 10 years. Okay. And here's to the point around the 250, we're at 3953. We've been up to 4210 back in 16, 17.
where's the birth? You don't have birth for, when you did this before, all you start with is pre-K. What do you start with, actually? That's a good question. You start with kindergarten? You've only start with kindergarten.
Meaning,
When you do your forecast, you can't really predict the rest of it, right? You've got actual for the births. You don't have any, you don't normally project births, or do you?
they do, and that's why I said you always want to be careful more than 3 or 4 years out,
Well,
because they're really just trending
what did they do?
numbers.
Do you have what they did for
I
the,
do.
we have the birth data, the birth data that we just looked at for 20, wherever you started there, 2010. You have those projections that they gave us then on the 10-year out for 2010 going out?
That would be this other chart. This chart,
No, that was the prior year, though. That was projected at a 1 year out.
That's this list right here.
No.
Are they good?
You've got births here from 2010 to 2020, actual data. Okay, my question is, in 2010, what was the projection for those numbers? You don't know, maybe we don't know.
I don't have those on
My
hand.
point is, we get this is the problem. This is the other issue. This is where, wisdom is about, knowing what to overlook. We've seen
We
this.
have all that data, though.
We would be good to know
You have all
because
that
we're
data.
about to see data that's projecting births. Well,
Right.
we haven't seen any of the history of the projections in the
He
past.
he
on
has
that.
all that data.
But
He
not-
has all that data.
Yeah.
Not in this stuff, but he has it all.
Also why I put a very strong caution on
Yeah.
on really looking at those projections more than 3 years out.
Yeah.
Because those kids aren't born yet, right? And even 3 years out, those numbers can shift a little bit. I mean, we look at them and we can talk about them and whatever, but they really are theoretical. Right, and that's why even this table here just looks at their projection a year in advance, a year before, not more than that. That's all. And again, this is as much luck. And there's math to it, there's science to it, I guess, but it's really, let's get into the projection. And one of the things that we'll see is there's different projections that are here, and a set of assumptions that may or may not hold true. So what we've done is open our kindergarten enrollment for next year already. We typically don't do that until December. We started that last month because we want to get a handle on what are things going to look like? What are those trends? What might those trends be? So similar, we have the whole big chart around enrollment projections by grade. But what I want to do really is focus on the K through 4 first, right? So We looked already at the 2020 births of 137, and then what that turned into in 25-26, which was the 288 kindergartners. Right, so that was what we were talking about before. That's happened. We know it. That's this year. On October 1, we had 288 kindergartners across our 3 elementary schools, okay, from the 137 births. If you go to the birth rate in 2021, you jump from 137 to 215. So if you think back on the historical, the highest number we saw was about 175. Now we're looking at 215 births. So because they trend out that birth decay ratio, they look at the 215, they say, all right, we're running at about a 1.98 ratio births to enrollment 5 years later. And so they're projecting 417 kindergartners. Now that's based on a set of assumptions that we can challenge for sure. You know, one of them is that the in-migration would keep pace with the births in order to keep that ratio at the 1.98. This is why that other table was relevant, right? If they miss the number by a lot, it'll adjust the birth decay ratio, you know, for the next year's projection. Right? If they hit the number, it would stay about where it is at 1.98, however, whatever that is. But that 417 kindergartners, that's a larger number than we saw at any grade level anywhere in the 10-year look back that we just had. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that's going to happen, but I can't say it's not going to. We don't know. That's why we've begun our enrollment already for kindergarten. We've continued to look at this. I've spoken with 2 other demographers to try to get some other feedback, and we're going to continue to dig into this. And again, I'll get into that a little bit more once we go through. So the question again,
This does get to the question I was asking earlier, is the multiplier, because these are the COVID move-in years now.
right?
And, you know,
right.
this gets to that question I asked earlier about, we had people moving out before they had children, or they moved out earlier, whereas a lot of people stayed in the city and moved out once their kids were in the elementary school. So has the demographer modified the multiplier at all? And it doesn't look like they have yet, to potentially account for it. These are the years. Next year is going to be like,
So those are
the
children that were
first-
born.
really first year of the COVID kids moving out, you know. I mean, my stepdaughter moved out of the city when she was pregnant and got out of the city, which wasn't happening with most people of our era. A lot of people moved out after their children were 3 or 4. So that multiplier makes sense, that there would have been a lot of kids that just the birth to the kindergarten number would need a 2 multiplier. Next year, that number is really going to be the test year of that multiplier.
That's the challenge with what we're trying to figure out and plan for.
Right.
Is that, you know, we don't have data coming out of a pandemic. Like
Right.
this, right. So we will have that. And I tend to agree, for what I know, that, you know, and certainly anecdotally, we've seen that couples moved to New Canaan and started their families that may have started their families elsewhere and then moved to New Canaan. Right. And there may even have been some, you know, multiple children, right? So they might have a 2nd grader and a kindergartner and a pre-K, and then move into New Canaan, which would have sort of been that in-migration across all 3 of those grades, you know, as they come in. At the same time, you know, if you look at the real estate over time and coming out of the pandemic, you know, so since the 2021 year to now, you know, has that kept pace with what it was? Has it slowed down or has it picked up? You know, we look to that somewhat to see. I do think you have to modify the assumption. But again, I'm not a demographer, but I think you need to do that. And at least, and one of the demographers I was talking to agreed that you do need to modify that assumption somewhat. These are the data we have now. We're getting another set. We're going to be looking at it. But this is the cause of one of the real great challenges, because we've been tracing this number for the last 4 years, right? This 2021 birth rate and what the projection, what that turns into. And the fact that this year's birth decay ratio for kids born in 2020 was 2. You know, you would have thought that maybe there'd be somewhat of a downward trend on that as we move into this phase, and there wasn't. It just gives me cause to just pause and make sure I keep an open mind to what could happen. So that's why we've started our enrollment already. We're encouraging everyone with kindergartners to enroll as quickly as possible, as soon as possible. We're at 147 kindergarten enrollees already. Now, we don't have a comparison point to that because we've never done it this early, but more have enrolled at West than the other two schools so far, which I find interesting as well. But if anything near these numbers comes to pass, what happens is that concentration of kids in the elementary and certainly in the kindergarten stresses the system pretty significantly. And I'll get into that in a few minutes when we do where we are with our capacities and enrollments.
One thing I should say is don't mistake these questions with anything like a lack of support for a top tier school.
No, not at all.
We have been spending 25 years building a top tier school, and we're not going to go off that mission. I think everybody can agree on that.
Yep.
But we also have in a way that makes sense to us and understand. But I just want you to understand that, and it just needs to be said though.
This is why I'm here. I like these conversations.
We want to continue to have a top tier school district forever.
But
we're gonna, oh, go ahead.
As a realtor, I would agree that, you know, there maybe 10 years back or so, it was sort of the middle school age or even younger, like maybe the older elementary school age that were the ones coming in. And yeah, so we all saw that as realtors. We saw that there was that shift where it was younger people coming in, having their kids here. Do you have a sense of family, like household size, whether that's changed? Because typically a town like New Canaan, you still tend to have more children than maybe the average in the country or in the state. But have you seen, or do you have a sense of whether that has changed more recently, or what you've seen since you've been here?
My own perception, I have not seen a change. I mean, we haven't really analyzed it carefully to know. But as far as the total number of households and the children, as we look at that ratio,
Right,
with
in the
parents and all that, we really haven't seen a noticeable change in that one way or the other.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Anecdotally, the number of households seems to be increasing. We have construction going on, a lot of new development going on, a lot of dense housing coming into the town. So you would imagine that it's going to bring in more births. So are you following the number of households in relation to all this, or you're just assuming that the birth number takes that into account?
We do follow it again ourselves. The demographers don't take those things into consideration. The NASDAQ demographers do not. So there's another group that we're talking with who look at that as a factor. But really NASDAQ just uses that ratio, you know, grade to grade, year to year.
I think that's a really important miss though. This is why it's been flat for 25 years. They think they really need to look into that, you know, that as an impact. There's the same 7,000 houses that there were 15 years ago. You're not going to have 30% growth in, you know, I mean, I don't know. The comment was made, houses are bigger and the families are smaller. You know,
Right, but there are more apartments.
yeah, but that's the point. Count it up.
Yeah.
Count it up. Let's not guess. We need to know that. That's an
But the
important.
apartments are
It
not
becomes a
necessarily
natural
filled-
limiting factor.
are not
is the
filled
point.
with folks, kids. They're maybe filled with old folks too, so.
And we did try to look at the pre-Ks, right? Let's get a sense where we are with pre-K in order to get a sense of, is there a larger class coming in? And we're at 40 different pre-Ks and counting with children from New Canaan. So it's very hard to nail that down because we're not a community where they're going to be on a waiting list and wait. You know, they're going to find a pre-K spot for their child. So they're at, just sort of concentric circles as we continue to look at it, plus those at home. So that data point, unfortunately, was a dead end for us trying to figure that out. Yep. And again, I think that this assumption is probably high. I think that, but if it's 10, 20, 30% high, we're still looking at a larger class coming in. And that's only my guess as someone who looks at it, but doesn't do this for a living. So the question was there also about how far out can you go with the births that we know? So they put provisional next to it until it's the year before, but you can see the births from 2024 now. They're running at 195, 23 was 214, 22, 190. So if the hypothesis is correct, and I think it very well may be, that folks moved into town before starting their families, then they are having, their first child might be this born in 2021, but it appears that they're continuing to have children, right? So those birds are.
Is 2024 factual or is that still an estimate?
It can adjust, but it's a start to, it's reported numbers that they have initially. Yep.
Right, but
because this is done at the this is October 1 of 2025. So
Anecdotally, my first granddaughter was born in 2021, and my second in 2025 in New Canaan.
there we go.
So I'm a good example.
Two of the.
I'm very interested.
Right. So the question is, what's the immigration number?
right, but if going back to when people actually get here, so if they came prior to the birth of the kids, those houses are now occupied for 18 years. At least until they decide to sell and go someplace else, right? Because they don't, well, the kids have gone through the public schools. And so those houses are not available for immigration from later people.
And the multiplier, if they had their first child here and were just having children here, then the birth number would equal the enrollment number, so the multiplier would be lower. That's
Right,
kind of dynamic.
and the stock of houses then gets increased. The increase to the stock of houses come from the outflows, which would be people deceased or move to move out of, Florida,
Let's just pick a
Texas, or
state.
whatever. Yeah. So, that's another one that, how many houses are gonna become available that way?
You're right. And that's again where the historical and a typical year as things trend, but now that with the coming out of a pandemic, the historical information is less reliable.
Right, but
Right.
your demographers don't take that data into consideration, do they? They don't take the stock of houses into consideration.
Not NASDAQ, they do not.
I was wondering, Maria, do you or the realtors track residences, not houses, but residences in the town, which would include apartments and condos?
What do you mean by track?
Do we have data? I mean, you said 7,000 houses in New Canaan, but there might be 5,000 apartments on top of that. So we might have 12,000 residences.
I know we have about 7,500 if I.
Residences, including apartments,
Thank you. Yeah, 7,432.
including all.
1,432. Well, that's a pretty accurate number.
But they only check it every 10, that's a 10-year number, so
We-
that's not gonna be
We just did it
updated.
with the
Yeah.
reval.
Yeah,
That was
the census does that.
2010 or 2020.
2020.
The revaluation
The
does. it.
reval was just done.
The reval gets it. Yeah, that's true, but the reval.
The reval does it. And the state tracks it
But we're
too.
adding residences
annually.
because we're adding apartments.
Right, but the state tracks it
Yeah,
annually
yeah.
as
No,
well.
I'm just saying the trend. So
It's not
It
significant.
isn't significant, actually. I know everybody thinks we aren't growing
Right.
significantly, even though people see a lot of construction. That's demolishing old houses, replacing them with new. Often, like you'll see new construction on 106, that was a 4-bedroom old thing that was rebuilt with 4 new. So while you'll see a lot of construction, it isn't a lot of growth in the housing stock.
like the view didn't add net more.
That
residences.
did. Well, I don't know how many, but it did.
But then it's a question of how many of them have children, right? And so what we're hearing is that it is not
I assume
significant.
most apartments are more senior housing. I mean, quite honestly.
Yeah, but if it is
Not
senior
necessarily.
housing, then they move from the house to the apartment, which makes a house available. So that adds to your stock of available houses. So there's a lot of moving parts here, right?
There are. I'm with, trust me.
You
I'm
better
with
run a district and not just count heads.
you are absolutely
Your favorite meeting.
explaining my point. You're expressing my point with this, which is,
Yeah.
we rely on the math, but there's so
There's
many
many other
variables
factors.
and you can't
Exactly
control
right.
for them. And so
We'll have to
we're entering into a phase of uncertainty for us in the enrollment. And that really, I feel like a successful teacher. That was the point. That was the main objective here, was to help to show that if we knew, everything would be different, but you just don't know. So this is a demographer. This is what they're telling us. They've been off year to year, as you saw in that other chart, but they've self-corrected over time. But this is, we need to plan. So we're going to be talking about next year's budget. We're going to be talking about, if we budget for 417 kindergartners, that's a very different number than 288 kindergartners, right? You're looking at another, if you've maxed out at 20 per classroom, you're setting up 6, 7 new classrooms across those elementaries. That's furniture, that's space, that's teacher, and there's nowhere to put them, right? So that's another conversation. So we're thinking of how can we come to the Board of Ed, the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen with a budget that's reasonable and responsible around this. So we actually have some good ideas that we'll share a little bit later, but
what can you, how do you think about the pig and the python thing? I mean, is this a 4-year phenomena? And is it going to revert to the mean where you go back to the 130, 140 births because you've had this COVID impact?
Well, it
Because
looks like
the rest
at
of the
least
statistics seem to say, well, no, we now have had a quantum shift and the 130s have gone to 190. Well, that's, yeah, sure, you start adding that up together and you get 6,000 kids after a while. But if it goes back, then all you have is that bubble that you have to manage through until, granted, it's 12 years, but you got to manage just that bubble.
right. And a bubble is easier to manage than a plateau, right? Right. Or a steady up, right? So that's where I think the births of the next 4 years are important to look at. Again, they may shift a little bit all the way to 2024, but probably not all that much. So we know, at least with reasonable certainty, that the births from 2021 to 2024 are higher than any of the years 10 years ago, for the last, 10 years back. So with reasonable certainty, we can say that.
That's right.
What we don't know is the in-migration, right? So that factor will have to shift, but we at least know that one piece, that more children have been born over these next 4 years in New Canaan per year than had been in any given year over the last 10 years.
And I will add, sort of kidding or teasing a little bit, but people got busy because they were home over COVID, and there were certain factors
Many
that
are still
like
home.
people were not commuting to work.
Right.
So things, so again, it can go back to a mean.
Yeah, it can. And I think that what we may see is the mean may be the in-migration, but it may not also. I mean, there's also some outgrowth of the great success that our schools have had for the last few years.
I was just about to say,
You know,
that.
I mean,
Don't,
there's-
that's a factor. Number of
but-
houses is a factor, but being a top district,
Well,
year in,
people
year
move
out is a factor.
Yeah,
That
well, people
probably,
move here just to go to
Of
school
course,
and then
right.
they leave.
so if looking at this chart, it would seem to me that the bubble, if you will, if it happens, doesn't happen in Saks until 2031 or 32. Because those are all below, all those years prior to that are below the highest level we had in prior years. So we know we have room.
That's
And the
right.
same thing goes for the high school. It doesn't hit the 9th grade until 35, 36.
That's right.
So that's important. I think if there's an uncertainty factor, there's multiple dimensions to this initial discussion.
Correct.
One of them is, do we need a 4th school? And when you ask that question, this data starts to tell us it's maybe a bridge too far, because there's got to be capacity we can do in the existing footprints versus adding a 4th school, which is a 100% permanent commitment.
Correct.
You build it, you got it. And you need a principal and all the rest of it. So again, we're not making any decisions tonight, but I know that that's in part of your calculus too. Is it really an expansion, or is it really, do we really need demand for a new one? And I think when I look at the 5th grade and the 9th grade, our decade out of here from now, that's a lot of time to make a pivot if we need to. But if we've committed to a 4th school, there's no pivot. You do that. We just jumped out of the plane. So,
But we're not making decisions
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah,
Because there are more
exactly.
factors to
Yeah.
put into the pot and
That's
to
right.
consider, and we'll do those over time. But the conversation around 4th school is really looking at the elementary. So yeah, I agree. The high school can flex, not just because of the facility, but because of the program. Right? The middle school, the program itself has room to flex because of the teaming that we do, where it's 4x4. You've got 4 teachers and students from 20 to 24 kids in each of those homerooms. That flexes up and down the way the teaming structure works. One of the challenges that we'll get to now, and then again, these are just some visuals and how it hits in the elementary first, and you can see, and then it also goes to the individual schools. I don't want to spend a lot of time there, but because this is even less accurate, but you just to give you a sense of the numbers, you have those in front of you, and then that projected. But let's go to the facilities. So we've got our three elementaries, our Sac School, and then our New Canaan High School. So just to get a sense of the facilities that, that exist that we use and use very well. The Sac School was built in 1957, renovated in 99 and in 2017. In the 2017 was the auditorium and the music areas and the new wing that was added in the front. The New Canaan High School was built in 1971. A wise decision to put a planetarium in at the time. And it was renovated in 2007 with the planetarium renovation just last year. Sorry. But 1971, that's when and again, Sacs was built as the high school originally, if you recall, right? And then the high school was built and things shifted. Our elementary schools, the three of them, South is the oldest. This year we are celebrating the 75th year for South School. Then West was built in 1960, and then East was built in 1964. Now, back in 1997, a similar question came before the town and before the boards. And the question was, do we build a fourth school, or do we expand the footprint of the existing elementary schools? And the decision was made at that time to expand the footprint of the existing elementary schools, and that's the renovations from 1997. And the decision was made to move the 5th grade to the middle school. And that's where Sacs became a 5 through 8 building, the largest middle school in the state. And if you combine the two divisions, it still is that largest middle school in the state, over at Sacs. So those all three were renovated in 1997 and made that decision to do that. But those are older buildings, obviously 75 years old for South and a little bit younger for East and West. And one of the challenges with buildings of that era is, do you want your building to influence your program, or do you want your program to influence your building, right? So that's where we get caught a little bit, and we're going to look at the layouts of those buildings and sort of how they're being used currently. Because I think this is an important, very important point to make, that when they did the renovations in 97 and probably before that too, they were very careful to develop buildings that were sort of equal programmatically across the board, all three of them, and in their capacities. So the capacities are generally the same. And our elementary schools are they're really not built around a number. They're built around the number of classrooms, not the number of kids, but the number of classrooms. So they're really built to be full capacity at 28 sections of kids. And what that means is that there are, between K4, there are 28 homerooms, essentially we call them sections, right? And that allows for the two classrooms dedicated for the science program. It allows for the art classrooms, the music classrooms, certainly PE, and it allows for the resource rooms that we need, and some of the occupational therapists, the psychologists, the social workers, the other needs that you have, and things like that. Those are things they really couldn't have foreseen back when they built these buildings back in 1950, 64, 60. Things like our literacy academy. The special education resource needs, the space needs for children in a resource program, or receiving individualized or small group instruction in reading, and the pullouts and the things that we do now that we know are beneficial for kids. But the building itself, in 1950, those roles didn't exist. Those services weren't being provided to children. So we've done a great job, I think, utilizing every inch that we can. But just keep that number 28 is an important one. And
in 97, were any of the elementary schools expanded to add classrooms or just renovate?
They added classrooms. They added classrooms because we were growing at the time. They added classrooms and again moved the 5th grade out into the middle school.
Was there any, besides renovation, was there any addition like a second floor or things?
I don't think a second floor, but I do think additional classroom space was put on. Yep. And they were renovated and they were updated in certain ways around common area spaces, things like that. Some of them, not all. Some, like over at West, it's a couple of classrooms that were combined to create library space, things like that.
One of the things that has changed since the elementary schools were updated is that the preschool used to be over at the high school. No, before South, before you were in the district. There used to be the alternate, like the Opportunity Center used to be at the high school, so that's pre you in the district. And that's where that pre-K existed. So
South? Because I knew it was at
Yes.
South for
yes, it went
some
to
time.
South.
And then it went to
yes,
West where
but
it is now.
started at the high school and it had actually high school students as part of programming with, that wanted to get into that kind of thing, they did.
Have that program.
Yeah, but
See,
the
but-
kids were there too.
Kids there. Okay, I'd have to look because I don't
Yeah.
see, there's no playground at the high school. And that's one of the things you would need for the pre-K, the district pre-K.
Mm.
But, because we still have the program at the high school now. That was a class that kids take
Yeah.
and we've got little
Yeah.
ones that come and do that. But
Mhm.
the district is a state mandated
Right.
pre-K
Okay.
for students that they graduate from the birth to 3 program.
Hmm.
And then we have 3, 4s and 5s that come in our special education program. And what we look to do is match them up with what they call typical students, at least a 50-50 ratio. Although it doesn't have to be, you could be 80% typicals and 20% students in special education if you wanted to. Just, you can't be the other way, right? So it's an opportunity for special education preschool kids to go to school with typical preschool kids and vice versa. And then when they age into the kindergarten, they already have friends, they know each other
Yeah,
and all
maybe
that. So
I-
it may be 2 separate programs.
It might have been. two separate
Because I
things,
do think the
that
pre-K was
my
at
kids
South
were
for some time.
babies.
Yeah, because South, its age and it was
Yeah.
built, and if you, there's rooms if you go back through South
Yeah.
that back in 1950 were built for pre-K with fireplaces, with, that we're using them for music rooms now, but with lots of little cubbies and things that was designed that way. But so right now, you're absolutely right that the pre-K is over at West and it takes 5 classrooms. So I said 28 is an important number because that's the number of sections that we run at maximum capacity at the elementaries without impacting program. But over at West, you've also have to take the 5 pre-K classrooms into account. So really it is 23 sections K4 and then 5 pre-K over at West. Okay.
You said back then the decision came before the town to build a 4th school or expand the existing. Be interesting to see the data that was given back then to say what were the assumptions and then what really happened.
We're looking through all of that now. Yeah, I'll be glad to share that when we pull it all together.
Required to provide pre-K?
Yes.
Because I know you said that there are multiple pre-K programs that are not in the purview of the public school system.
Right.
So, but you need to have 5 sections in West dedicated to pre-K?
We do, and the number of sections that we run is dependent upon the number of students eligible for that pre-K program who are residents of New Canaan in the special education program. So that graduate from the birth to 3, and then we pick them up 3, 4, and 5, and then they move into the kindergarten for us.
Okay.
Yep. So if there are 25 students that are eligible, then we look for at least 25 typicals to go in there. So we'd have a pre-K of 50 at a minimum. Yeah. And again, that's something that I think we do a fabulous job with. And it's something that could be expanded over time. If we were to offer instead of 5, 10 pre-K classrooms, then we could have more of those typical students participating with the special ed kids that we have, and they're tuition paying. So that's a revenue generating operation that we have. So doesn't quite pay for itself, but between that and IDEA, it's pretty close. Okay. So be sure to join the celebration of 75 years for South this year. I'll get you a t-shirt. The map over at South, I think that, again, I mentioned the 28 sections. Again, that's a more important number than the number of kids because we keep within our class size guidelines. And so you might actually go up students and down sections or down students and up sections. It all depends upon their distribution across the grades. So all I'm really showing here is that there are no spaces over at South that say open. What we've done, we have 4 resource rooms over there. And we're running at 26 sections right now at South. So what we would do to get to the 28 is combine the 2 of the resource rooms and the teachers there. But we're using every inch of the building in a variety of different ways. Again, they have programs such as the Literacy Academy and other things. If we go to West, and I know these all look a little bit different because each building does a little differently. At West, you've got your 3 buildings, right? The building 1, 2, and 3 in the back. And these are the classrooms there. And you can see in the middle of the building is where that pre-K is, across from the library. And one of our challenges, to be frank, with pre-K is you should have bathrooms in those pre-K classrooms, and 2 of the 5 don't. So that's other work that'll have to be done, but we'll talk that down the line a little bit. And again, they're running at 28 sections now at West. So they're at 23 plus the 5 pre-K. So they're right at their sort of full capacity, 100% optimal use. And over at East, and I know it's not a great visual, but just to get a sense of it, East is our largest school, and we're running 30 sections today over at East. And so what that means is in all 3 of our elementaries, we no longer have a second science classroom. And again, I can get in the program if you want, but our program asks for 2 science classrooms, one for the teacher, who's our science teacher at each elementary, and then another where teachers can take their kids into the science room to do labs and do science work. Now they do that in the classroom instead, because we've had to convert that into a classroom, given the numbers. Over at East, they have that, plus they had to split their music room, which is the one on the far right, where you see music 121A, 121B. That's Merrick and Leviton. That was a music room. We split it in half. And then when we have larger groups, they do it on the stage in the cafeteria, because again, they're at 30 sections. That's where we are today as we're running through. And I just wanted, again, to just give you the visual, because we can talk about numbers of kids in here and there, but it really is, again, those sections and the program. And so we've had to make some adjustments, and we're doing great with it. And so it's working, and we're doing what needs to be done. And we'll continue to make adjustments as we need to. But this is part of the reason why, if we just kept moving ahead at the numbers that we're at, we're still impacting program a bit based upon the current status of the number of sections. If these numbers that we just talked about around K are close to what was projected, well, that will have a significant impact that we'll have to.
Do you have a sense for how many of the sections are sort of discretionary as opposed to required?
So when I talk sections, I'm talking about homerooms, right? And those homerooms are based upon the total enrollment numbers for kids. So if there are 100 kids in first grade, then we're going to run 5 sections at 20 kids per section. That's it, right? If there are 120, we'd run 6. If there were 80, we'd run 4. And we try to be at around 19 for those in those grades. The class size guidelines run from 16 to 20. Good practice for us is always trying to be at or above 18, sort of that halfway mark and up. We did make some decisions around the pandemic to bring down our first grade class a little bit, coming out of the pandemic, because we knew they were negatively impacted. So our class sizes ran at about 17, but generally we try to hit 18 or higher, 18 fractionally. We can't always do it because it's really about the distribution of kids in those grades, but we do our best to do that.
You achieved the 17 by expanding the number of classrooms?
Yeah, so we will, if we're sitting at if we're right at 16, sometimes we'll hold off on opening a section at that, because we anticipate some out-migration and we might be able to make it work. It's really, we're looking at this twice a week, all through the summer, right into August, and sometimes
Sounds
making
like
some.
You have some available sections in each elementary school?
Well,
Or not?
it can come down to the wire. It can come down. It
Can you
can.
convert the planetarium to classrooms?
Oh.
That was a joke. That was a joke. Sorry, I choked up. But true, we talked about what in the 1997 piece, there was a period of time where we moved the 8th grade out of Saks into the high school for a number of years. And the 8th grade was there in order to do some renovation work at Saks in order to make that work. So again, I only say that because we have done some extreme things over time to solve problems. And that's really what this entire conversation is about, from beginning to end, solving problems and setting up for long-term, right? Whatever we decide to do, I think we should think of it as, is this a 30-year solution, a 50-year solution? Because I will tell what we're going to learn, I think, Monday night with the Board of Education is that just the roll forward is a sizable investment. So let me move to the next. So the SACS capacities, I mentioned that can flex up or down. I'm comfortable there. I'm not worried about making that work with the current configuration. If we had to, if these numbers even materialize as they are, we'd have squeezing, but we'd be able to do that. Yeah, we'd figure it out. And the same, I didn't even put the high school out here because the
Yeah.
same with the high school. Again,
Too
it's
far out.
the program of the high school is different. And at SACS, we can make some adjustments. And I'm comfortable, we can flex up to 1,600 kids at SACS and be perfectly fine. If we had to go higher than that, we'd solve that problem and figure it out.
Just to be clear, when utilization says 81%, it means you have 19% capacity to add sections.
So the building is really running well at about 80%. It doesn't mean you have 19% lying fallow, right? It means you're still using every part of the building, but if you had to, you could get up to you could go to 100%, but you're squeezing. You're allowing the facility to dictate program to a
You would
degree.
add kids to a homeroom?
You could exactly
That's
make your
one way.
homerooms bigger.
Wow.
You could, you'd have to consolidate other resource areas, we have, for instance, 2 classrooms that are off the library that are spaces for STEM and technology, computer labs, language labs, like those could be converted back into classrooms. So it's not without impact. Really 80%, 85% for middle high school is really where you're optimal. And then when you go up, if you go to 100% classroom utilization, say in a high school, that means every room is being used every period. Then like where are your teachers going when they're not teaching, and things like that. So there's other pieces that flow from it, but it's doable. And that's part of the point, right? That if that were to occur, we can solve that. We can solve that and make that work.
So class size targets is 24. What is the actual at SACS right now?
Generally, it runs between 20 to 24. That's for the homerooms, they run within that. Sometimes it may be a little bit higher, a little bit lower based on math placements or elective areas, but the homerooms are between 20 and 24. Yep. And we do adjust our staffing. Like for instance, this year, the 5th grade is smaller than it was last year. So we're down 2 sections in 5th grade. Next year's 4th grade will be the similar size, so we won't add them back, but then the one after that will go up, so we'll add back 2 sections. So we do adjust it along.
So as you look at those options, one of the thoughts I had was that we've talked about before, but why not have a staffing model that more teachers in the elementary schools versus more space? And maybe it's both. Maybe it's more space, but not as much, but more teachers. And you have that's a very good 5-year, 10-year answer. And then if the thing pivots and goes back, we haven't overcommitted on space. And then we'll know a lot more. I'm just saying there could be a scenario where staffing alleviates pressure.
As long as you have a place to.
Yeah, I understand. That's it's got to be part of the equation here, I would think. Staffing could be a piece of the solution. More staffing, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So all of that to come back to the original question. Okay. And I saw it as 4 different options. After the conversation, Todd and Chris and I had briefly about sort of the thinking and what could be helpful for tonight and for going forward. When we think about 4 different options here, there's the status quo, which is keeping things the way that they are, crossing our fingers, managing through some policy and operations, and thinking about perhaps if we needed some short-term space in a specific location. Now, unfortunately, East is our largest building, and all the projections have East as a school that's growing more than the others. Now, again, that may just be because the base is larger and the factor and how it goes, but East also has a more concentrated housing than the others. So East has been growing more quickly. But we've begun the research and reached out to some different companies. What would it take and cost to drop portables at the schools? What's the cost on that? What does it look like? What's the time? What's the commitment? And that we've got to pursue that as one of the options. And that would be a short term.
Could you free up by redistricting?
Yep, that's
It's west.
Scenario 1.
I'll tell you that there was a time not so long ago when the east side of 123 was zoned to West School.
That's right. That's right. And it was about 16 years ago, give or take now, that there was some light redistricting done, where the demographer at the time actually said, if you just leave it, it'll probably balance back out. But it was, some folks were moved from south over to east. And now east is
Well, people were
the one
moved
that's
out
over
west.
capacity. And there was the west to east move as well.
Yeah, so I mean, you could,
Yep.
you could go back.
Well, so scenario one,
Scenario,
right?
It's a long-
scenario. one.
So status quo.
It's a long way from 123 over to, the West School, but
Is,
it has been done.
and we know that that's an option. We know that's a possibility, but we know that we
Experienced
don't
at it. You're in charge of it.
go into that lightly. I'm just going to say, right?
have a
But it is
leader.
something that has to be on the table for consideration for sure. And that's, again, if you look at
Well, but you
scenario
have to
one,
you have to relieve the pressure on east.
well, yes, so simply redistricting won't do it.
Right.
Just because there's nowhere to redistrict to. We have a couple classrooms at South, that's it, right? So unless you're talking, and you're not going to go into redistricting for 30, 40, 50 kids. So if everything stayed the same, we'd be okay. But if we're anticipating some increase, and maybe it's not 130 students next year, but maybe it's 40, and then maybe it's 50 after that, and maybe it's more after that. And if they are concentrated or not, you're right about, we need to relieve some pressure at east. And so the status quo would be to see where those kids are, and then add as needed around a portable or something.
The risk is, how do you keep the standard of east up
That's right.
if it gets too big?
Well, you're right, because what flows from there are things such as, you have one principal, one assistant principal at each of those locations. If you have 580 children and 400 some odd families, whatever it might be, how does one principal establish the relationships that matter with that many families? It's just too difficult. I agree. And I think that, so you have to look at those pieces. You also have to look at, you hit a maximum around, again, the number of sections. They're at 30 over there now. That's 6 per grade. You start to go higher than that. Now you're impacting schedule. You have to look at cafeteria, kitchen, playgrounds, parking. There are many things flow from that, right? It's not even just the number of classrooms, but it's all of those other experiences, libraries that kids have that would need to be looked at. Certainly the cafeteria and the kitchen would need to be looked at. Can they do the work and pump out the food and do what has to be done? So those are, those are some of the challenges around status quo, to be fair. The scenario one was to say, okay, if we're going to free up some classrooms, one way to do it is to look at a different model for pre-K. And we've been calling around for short term, as you know, talking to some of the churches, some of the folks in town. Is there space anywhere, right, that we could use on a temporary basis, as we just, again, it's about trying to buy some time and see what those trends are. We've been striking out on that a little bit, but we're going to keep looking and trying and talking to folks who've been very gracious, but our needs are pretty intense, right? We have 5 classrooms. So there's a thought around, could you build a standalone pre-K? We're still looking at it, don't know. I will share that there are districts that have built pre-K into the renovations of their new buildings, and they've designed for pre-K. Things like heated floors and different spaces for gatherings, other things that really are appropriate for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. But that's scenario one. And then there would be, so if you move the pre-K somewhere else, you'd have 5 classrooms over at West. And then you'd look at, okay, that's about give or take 100 kids. What would the redistricting plan be around that? And so that's something else that we would look at. And then we get into the scenarios 2 and 3. Scenario 2 is to expand the existing footprints of the 3 elementary schools. Now, what you see here is the difference between the status quo and the grade reconfiguration, because part of this conversation has been about that 5th grade. And is it best practice to be K4, 5-8, or are you better being K5, 6-8? And there's some strong feeling and research around K5 as being a preferable model. Mm-hmm. Just as a baseline, the standards that we're teaching to the kids and assessing them on are K5 standards, right? That break is intentionally there. There's a question about, would they benefit from fewer transitions, right? So you'd go K5, 1 transition into 6 through 8, and then to the high school, because you would really consolidate 6 through 8 into 1 start time, 1 end time, and that would be 1 school. Versus the split times that we have now based on the number of kids that are in that facility. So you could have some advantages there. So that's where the conversation was, if we're going to be investing, this should be a part of, at least a part of the conversation and into the consideration. Again, this is more about program driving, building and configuration versus configuration driving program. So scenario 2 would be that.
Then what would happen if Saks is already being used at only 80%? If you only have 6, 7, 8 there, then that'll be really underutilized, won't it?
I'm glad you asked. So in this scenario, either 2 or 3, or there'd be a three-phase plan, right? It would be to whether it's, well, either 2 or 3. 1, in scenario 2, you build these additions and do what you need to do in the existing. And then when you move that 5th grade out to the K, so it'd be K5, then you renovate the lower division at Saks to house both the central offices and the pre-K. So you can renovate that, the accordion in the back, the lower division, you could turn that into a pre-K space. And then you could really expand your pre-K, and you could have 6 or more, whatever you think is appropriate, and use the space for that, plus the district offices. And then the building that we're in over at 220 would be able to house the full alternative school program and the full launch program on either side of that. And we wouldn't be renting space upstairs. So there's a couple of things flow from either scenario 2 or 3 to make sure that we continue to use all of the space that we have. And housing the pre-K there would give us an opportunity to both sort of design that space purposefully and truthfully, maybe selfishly, co-locate the central offices with the kids, because I think that, we're better off being near the schools where we can be on site. So
what would we do with the 221?
220 would be split in half, like the half like we have now. The Board of Ed offices would go to the alternative school and launch would use the other side. So those 2 programs would stay there and they would use the first floor for those 2 purposes.
So they'd have a lot more space.
Well, we're currently renting space now next door for the alternative school because launch has expanded so much. Yeah, so we would no longer be renting there or
You'd
upstairs.
still need that space.
The 220, that first floor we would, but we wouldn't be renting any other spaces. If one of the things with the 220 that works so well is for our launch program, it's a perfect location. You really, because those, our launch program is for students 18 to 22, right? And it's really a job skills, life, work, study sort of program. And so to be right there on Elm, they're able to walk to their different placements and go to, whether it's the library, the store, and it just really is a great location. If you moved them over to Saks, you'd have them in vans all day going back and forth, and they're better off being able to walk there and being outside. That's, it's just better for that program. And for the downtown campus, those are students who, it's our alternative school. They struggle in the full high school. They struggle on campus, on site. They need a more kind of intimate setting. So for them to be downtown or at 220, where they're still connected to the school, but they have a place separate, makes a big difference for them. Yeah. So
One more scenario you want to cover before we ask some questions?
there is one more, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the scenario 3 is the 3 phases versus the 2, and that is the building of the 4th elementary school. So that would be building the 4th elementary school, and then renovating the 3 existing, converting all 4 to K5 buildings, and then doing that same renovation over at Saks for that space that's there. So everything would be used. You'd be moving to a K5 configuration. You wouldn't be expanding the existing elementaries, but you would be doing some renovation. And then you would be really building the new school first. So you do that piece first, and then you phase into it. And there is an advantage to the location, because right now, one of the challenges, of course, is that we've got a lot of roads in New Canaan, and all of our schools are concentrated on the south side of town. So by having a school in the north, you would shorten those bus rides for those kids. You'd be able to collapse those tiers in between start times and end times, and you tighten things up quite a bit. So you'd be able to catch enough kids in about a 2-mile, 3-mile area around that location on 123. So there's some advantage to
A
it.
couple of questions. So what is the timing of the Board of Ed now? What's their next step? Because without any dollars, this is all sort of a academic discussion. But what's the
So the next step on Monday night, there'll be presentation by the group that's done the function, the FCA, the Facilities Condition Assessment. And that's a very detailed assessment. It's a 15-year outlook. It's going to feed into our 10-year capital plan, and it'll give us a sense of what is status quo. What does it look like just to maintain our existing buildings and try to be as nimble as we can to adjust in real time. And then so once we know those numbers, we also then are developing our educational specifications to have a sense of what a cost might be around each of these different scenarios. And then you can look at deltas, right? So if we know what our move ahead is X, what is the scenario one is what minus X. So what's your real cost? You know, what's that up? And so I think that's the important conversation. That's what the board is preparing to have next.
That starts next week.
Monday night becomes the assessment. That'll have some real numbers to it.
And who did that?
That was a group called Studio Jade, who came highly recommended from.
They're an outside consultant.
Yes. Yep, just like 12 years ago, we had another group, Silver Petrocelli, do our facilities assessment. It's good practice to do it every 10 years, give or take.
So maybe walk through the timeline. So they have that meeting, then, because what I want to get to is when does this become a real discussion in terms of making some decisions?
So they have the discussion Monday night.
Yep.
And so the next piece is to finish up the educational specifications, which really is what would a new building be designed for, and then what would we need to do to renovate the others to, sort of complement that, or at least sort of be close. Because I do think that's a guiding ethic here. We've, I think, always had that. Our schools should be pretty, equitable across the board as far as program and sections, what have you. So that we're going to finish that piece up. And as we're doing that, we'll continue to really nail down what will costs be for modulars if we had to do that period of time. What is there any feasibility at all for a standalone pre-K center? That there may not be, right? There's almost no available location for additional building like that. As you know, they've done pretty close analysis of what's available, and it really just kind of points to one place for a school. And while pre-K might be a little bit different, so that's what we're exploring. So over the course of the next, it's probably a month from Monday that these conversations will be happening in the facilities committee, because there's also either board elections on Monday, and there'll be some reconstituting of committees is generally what occurs after that. So those things have to settle out. So it might be a month and a half of conversation and final decision. And then I'd be ready to come back with some more.
You say final decision, the Board of Ed would vote on a path?
We have to decide a path forward, yes.
In December?
Well, that's too soon.
Okay.
Right? For a formal vote. I think it's more of
it would be in this next
understanding
budget.
These scenarios.
It would be in this next budget, but would there be any cost other than engineering and other things in the budget we're going to be putting together here in a few months? We're not putting a hole in the ground, and if whatever scenario they thought they could pick and that we agreed, it sounds like it's a year away. Well, I guess we need to see that. I guess we don't know. I mean, we need to. So in January, we won't meet with you until February. Will you have a timeline, recommendations, and an evaluation of those scenarios?
Yeah, I think we have to.
Okay, so the only question I have for you is then, there needs to, I looking at those scenarios, it strikes me that there's a 1A in there. So I would hope there's some flexibility on those scenarios. Like there's a little piece of this one that could work and a little of that one. You made a great comment. You said it was adjusting in real time. And I think let's not lose that thread. Adjusting in real time is really a good idea, particularly for the next 12 to 18 months. Because if I looked at those growths in each one of the elementary schools, the numbers also drop 2 years later. So are we sizing for the 161 at one school or the 125, which drops that it drops to? And I want to understand all that, because that comes into this modular or other options. Okay. I'm still not sure I'm clear as to when that body.
The budget conversations with the Board of Selectmen begin in January.
January, right.
So you're
not going to come to us this year though with this, are you?
No, because really as the steps around the process includes going to the Board of Selectmen and having conversation about creating a municipal building committee.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So that group would continue to sort of pick up the mantle and continue doing the work that would have representation of community members, board members, and otherwise. So, it's
Do we even know if Clark's a feasible alternative with the wetlands that are there and everything? I mean, you don't have to answer that now, but those are the kinds of questions everybody has to get grounded on.
Right, right. We've done some.
Yeah.
Some look at it, and there's some that say it isn't, there's some that say it is, and we've got to keep doing our research. Yeah.
Slightly related, but a little different. I mean, you went through the years of renovation. It kind of stuck out that the 3 elementary schools haven't been renovated since 97. So even if we didn't have this, potential scenario, are we not coming up on, a renovation scenario anyway?
Yeah.
And does that, almost drive, in my mind, sort of a scenario too, because they all need to be renovated. If you build a new school and you have to renovate the other 3, that
Right.
seems truly insane. But so anyway, I just like, when I see 97, I say, I know my children were there almost in 97, probably the eldest was. Anyway, it just sort of seems like they probably, I'm sure the Board of Ed's going to think about that, but I wouldn't want to lose sight of that, because if we build a new school and then we've got to renovate all the other 3,
Well, but that's the plan.
that's a major.
That's why this is.
Well, but
This
that's,
is $300 million project, because you've got.
well, I don't see
200 in
in
one
scenario
bucket and
3,
100 in the
no,
other.
but I don't see in scenario 3 renovate the other
Oh, yeah.
3 schools as well.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it doesn't say that. So anyway, I'm just saying,
It says convert the K 6, 8 alignment. That's.
well, but
renovate.
that gets converted because you have a new school that you can redistrict and move everybody up to the north school, and then you
Is it?
shrink the dam. That's
Or
In
is
scenario 3, there is some renovation to the
Okay.
elementaries.
okay.
There is.
You've got a long-term
And-
capital plan, I'm sure has renovations for the
That's
elementary
what-
school at some
that's what
point. So
it's-
that's Bob's
That's-
base case. That's part of it.
The question really is that's where that facilities condition assessment is so important.
Right.
Because we're going to see is just to,
And-
what's the anticipated cost just to move ahead and do nothing, but just maintain the mechanicals, maintain the envelope and do that work. And I think that, that number, and that's going to be in today's dollars. So,
Right.
as we look and inflate, it's going to, and the numbers that were presented were all escalated over time and everything else. So, but we'll be able to look at that. That will, if it's X, what's the delta to get to Y? And that'll be part of the
Studio
conversation.
Jade is doing.
Yes, the X. Yeah.
But they are a silver Petrocelli.
The report that Silver Pet did,
It's the same.
where there, Silver Pet is that's an architectural firm who
Right.
did that work. This is a firm that does this work exclusively. So,
Does-
does the facilities condition assessments. Yep. And there was a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, architect who walked through all of the buildings and all the spaces to develop. Yep. So Monday night should be very informative.
My sense is that this is such an important decision. And it's such an expensive decision that the way forward must be iterative, step by step, and my concern is that a decision will get made at the Board of Education, which is an independent body, and so we cannot require it to come and talk to us on an iterative basis. And then here's this thing that's now a loss.
Well,
And it's
there are
wonderful
steps
how
along the
quickly.
way. There are steps along the way. There are checkpoints along the way, including
Has to be.
Board of
There has to
Selectmen,
be- You have
the-
to come back
Mhm.
and say, we haven't made a final decision yet, but,
This is what we're thinking.
here's what we're thinking. Otherwise, if it comes here fully baked, that's gonna be.
I guess we would ask that to the board, to work together with us. I appreciate they've got to do their work, all the things you just said, and that's terrific, but this would be a lot better if we just work together on it. If
Yep, and
you know how it
that's the
goes.
spirit I'm here tonight.
you hand,
Right,
you hand
that's-
somebody a fait accompli, that can go the wrong way. So.
Yeah, no, I don't. That wouldn't happen. I mean, I'm here. I think we work well together. Wanted to get the ball rolling.
No, this was perfect. I thought this was, this was, I think, just what we asked for without we wanted the dollars. You don't have them, fine. That's okay. We can't.
Said
get
I
ahead
gave you
of it.
student population.
But this was terrific to get the conversation started. I think for this board to get their head around where the thinking is, and get a sense as to what the ideas were. I love that you're looking at scenarios. There may be a 1A or a 2B that, starts to kind of come together. So.
The goal in all of this is to solve for the problem in front of us.
Yeah.
That's what it is, right?
The
And we want to make
demographic-
sure.
The demographic piece, though, is not yet solid enough to sell this deal.
That's the big challenge, right? Because by the time it is, If you don't plan for it, you're too late. Right,
Well, you're not really
Yeah.
ever too late. I mean, you could build, I mean, how long does it take you to build a building?
So you can get started.
417 kindergartners walked through our door in August and we weren't prepared. It would have a significantly
Well,
negative.
you're not gonna have a building in August either, so you'll have to have module, no matter what you do, we won't have that. So
Yeah,
we've got to
that-
get
that
it.
First
that's
class of
right.
kindergartners are going to have to just deal with plan A. The plan,
Yeah.
for scenario one, because there is no alternative at this point. And the kids are here and you're just trying to figure out how many of them are here.
Right, and where they are, and then we talk about dropping modulars, and what do we do?
To be,
But again, I think that it's a low probability that we're going to have 417 kindergartners next year. I do.
Yeah.
But it's not zero, but I think it's a low probability.
so
And so
part,
that's where we're continuing to talk with other demographers as well to get different perspectives.
part of the budget cycle though, this year has to be a scenario where we have a good triage to make that be a success.
Correct.
Just like you did with COVID. You jumped in front of that curve just in case on some things, and we jumped the line on a lot because we were prepared. So we want to make sure we're prepared. So that'll be part of the February conversation, I guess.
We've already been
fair.
engaged in the conversation internally around
That's
how do
fair.
we package that in a way that works so
Okay.
that, we're prepared, but we're not overextended. That's the goal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts for now? I don't know if Michael's still on. I'm not sure Michael's on.
Yeah,
Michael?
yes, no, this is a good presentation. Thank you, Brian. Let's see.
Yeah, great start.
It really goes through the different scenarios very thoroughly, and I think like Todd said, we're grateful for having the #1 school in the state for sure. But we just got to make sure we're spending the money right here.
Yeah. No, this was great getting us grounded. Okay, thank you very much. Safe drive home. It's windy out there. Okay. Brian and Ann? Yeah. Couple more items. Oh, no. 3. Continue.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Hi.
All right, hi there.
Hello.
What's the good news, Ryan?
Okay. Let us do it. We're looking at October, month ending October. Revenue as always. Current tax collections, 89.3 million. That's 3.3 million over 25, 3.8% over 25, and 54.4% of the 26 budget. Prior year tax collections, 198,000 over fiscal 25, 20.7% over 25, and 66% of 26 budget. Building permits are 321,000, 20,000 over last year, 6.8% over last year, and 35.6% of the budget so far this year. Conveyance fees are at 899,000, which is 63,000 less than last year, 6.6%, and 56.2% of this year's budget.
Is the building permits seasonal, I guess? More is gonna happen in the spring and summer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, for sure.
That's kind of
Yeah.
slower.
Yeah.
Okay.
Parking permits are at 690,000, 42,000 over last year, which is plus 6.4%, which is 75.1% of this year's budget. Interest on investments, I actually have updated handwritten numbers here based on a statement that came in like 10 minutes before I walked in the room, or at least that's what Ann gave me. So instead of 789,000, I have 904,000 for
There you
FY
go.
26 actual, which gives us a plus 49,000 for the over last year and 5.7% over last year. It's 50% flat of this year's budget.
Huh. That's good.
Transfer station tipping fees are at 90,000, 41,000 less than last year.
I'm just sorry on that one. I have to dwell on the fact that it's 50% of the budget at the end of October.
Yep, we're at
Highlighting that for
900, yeah.
it's good.
Board of Ed excess cost grant, we don't get that until the spring, so don't worry about it for now. And then all other revenues, I have 6 items here that are the vast majority, 96 or so percent of the year over year difference. Member equity is 64,000 over last year. State grants, 56,000 over last year. And then these bottom 4, lien fees and interest, 33,000 less than last year. Operating transfers, 529,000 less than last year. Likely a timing thing that we had as well. Excuse me, unrealized gain or loss is a loss of 193,000 compared to last year. And sale of assets is 20,000 less than last year. So that's the vast majority of that other revenue difference from prior year. Questions on revenue or anything? Or?
Any questions? I think you're good.
All right. Expenses, just a single line for now, 55.9 million is where we're at this point, which is 30.9% of this year's budget. Overall net revenue minus expenses is 40 million. That doesn't mean anything right now.
No. Anything jumping out at you on expenses on the bad side?
On 2 of the transfers, but we're able to cover it within the budget, and then 1 will be a contingency.
I mean, is it material? I'm sorry, I don't see it.
About 120,000.
Okay. Okay, anything else on that,
What
Ryan?
about this insurance liability at 93%? Am I reading that line?
Which one? What
Yeah,
page you on?
so
59.
it was 1.572 million, and what he's saying is we have spent
93% of the,
spent 1,463. Is that what I'm reading?
yeah.
So is that
Well, yeah,
an
but-
annual bill or something? I
It
don't know.
looks like it's all paid up front.
Yeah, it's encumbered. This includes encumbrances.
It does, yeah.
So it'll have the full amount encumbered for the year of what we expect on
Okay,
our
so the
policies.
fact that,
Yes,
that we're at 93% of the, because you're encumbering,
covered it to hold the funds. Yep.
all right, that makes sense.
Okay.
List that separately if that's more useful.
No, I understand it.
We'll just ask you 4 more times.
Yeah,
And
because we'll forget
yeah,
about it.
yeah,
next time.
absolutely.
Oh, but some of them, we hold it.
All right. Did you want to do the cash balance? And you added a new feature this month.
Look at that. It's on this than I am, but I built the sheet so I can start talking about it. So this is, we have cash balances and investment balances as of September 30th. So this is not October numbers, this is September numbers here. For each month, just based on what's processed through the system, what we've actually booked into the system. So that's why we've got September as a number, not October. We haven't finalized all those transactions.
How do we look at this cash balance? That doesn't include any, that's cash. That's not CDs. That's not investments that Andrew's trying to make money
Cash balance, right.
for the
Yep.
13. That would be over here in investment balance. Yeah, okay, good.
Next page is actually the list of those individual object types, if that helps you get some clarity. That page 6.
I didn't see that. Okay.
Couple that we're working on closing to consolidate
Yeah.
that we can get,
Okay.
get these smaller again.
That includes the pension fund.
Those are the investments. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's.
Parsley and our regular.
To be clear, I think might want to share, but this was a request by the auditors to have this reported on a monthly basis, I think. Yeah,
And
that's
we want to
fine.
make sure this board sees the same document.
Okay. Anything else? Team, any questions on any? Okay. If there's
But
not-
our invested cash is the Webster Money Market and Janie Montgomery Scott.
Janie, UBS, and the money market are the general fund
UBS is
investments.
also ours, right?
Mhm.
Okay, all right. Yeah, this is a little bit of mixing the cats and dogs
In the
together.
pension, I almost feel like there
We're
should be
gonna
a
pull it,
separate
actually,
column for
what
the
I was
pension.
thinking when we were going through it, we'll change it up so that we'll group it differently. So you'll see it cleaner. We'll do a
Yeah,
pension,
because the
OPEB, Marceline.
pension, you know, I mean, it's all fiduciary money. We can't do anything. Yeah, it's not our money.
Let together differently.
Let's do it like that. The cash and the money that we're investing, that isn't pure cash. It's actually, we're, you know,
It's kinda
using,
cash investment.
it's cash and other liquid assets, you know, like that we're doing.
And
Okay.
then pension separate.
And then all this, yeah, all the pension and the employee benefit stuff separate.
Good. Okay. All right. Anything else? No? Okay. And you have some transfers.
First one is a just review page, just small dollar little transfers, just one page there.
So it's this page for review. Yep.
Yeah.
Any questions on those de minimis amounts? Okay. Approval?
There's a one single 5 approval and a couple 26 approvals.
And the reason we have a 25 is we're still accruing invoices if they happen to come in for 25, anything over 1,000. We did have some smaller ones, but we did have some come in. This will be the final accrual that we need an approval so that we can get the budget transfer done for the audit.
So we had money in the legal services account.
No, we actually got a check back for a case. So we have what's called a 10-10-10. So we got 10,000 plus back into the legal. So that goes against our legal cost. So that was a reduction of those expenditures. And then we had some smaller
Gotcha.
expenditures on the other
Okay.
3.
What
And
do
the
we-
offset, sorry, the offset goes to contingency.
Right, I see that.
Okay.
Sorry,
I
I-
see
that's
that.
what I should
That's
have
the
said that.
difference.
The offset
So
is
the other two are
contingency.
just
Yeah.
little.
So you've
Yeah.
increased the contingency account. Okay, all right. That makes sense.
Okay, we can approve these together, I think, if you want to do one motion, unless there's a,
Well, there's another page.
yeah, no.
A separate transfer. You want us to approve each page?
We can do one approval for 3, unless there's any disagreement.
All right, let's go.
I'll move.
Well, we got to explain,
No,
anything you want to
we gotta
explain,
go to the
anybody,
third
just
one.
explain the other 2, workers' comp and contingency. Let's just make sure we understand what they are.
Had heart and hypertension. We have some higher claims coming in than expected. And fortunately, we have workers' compensation. I don't want to put it out to the universe, has been coming down, so we have some savings there. So we're taking from the workers' compensation budget and putting into heart and hypertension to cover, hopefully for the year.
Okay.
That'll take care of that. Unfortunately, our unemployment compensation has been going up. We haven't had that in a couple of years. This year has been quite large. So we're thinking it's going to be about 60 for the rest of the year, based on the numbers as is. So we need to take that from contingency.
Okay. Any questions on those 2 items? Concerns, thoughts? If not, we can make a motion to approve each one of the 3 line items.
I'll move.
Bob, Maria seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I know you got to go. Okay.
I wanted to let you know that we did get our GFOA budget award for fiscal year 26. So it was started by Josh, finished by Ryan, but also what happened in that too, Ryan redid the budget book, tightened it up, went
Ooh.
through the GFOA guidelines, increased our score out of 4. So that got us closer to a perfect score.
Did you send it to Josh just to let him know?
I didn't have the heart to do it, so I need to give
Talking about
a
it's-
recommendation to
give it
Ryan
to
and what he
me.
did.
Well done.
He
Well
did a
done.
great job. He did a really, really good job on
And the
it.
audit is clicking along.
Yes, you should have it in front of you before your December meeting, you'll have the report to take a look at. But
Okay.
so far, so good.
Very good.
Yep.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, we have one.
Was this stuff here supposed to be for treasurer's report, but we're not having treasurer's?
That's old.
This is all stuff.
That was from, yeah, that's not, that was,
No, that's okay. Come on, I got mixed up with other papers. All
yep,
right.
okay.
All right.
Okay, we have one other item. We will need to go into executive session. Tucker, we want to invite Michael. He's the only one online I think we need.
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll, yeah, we'll have to excuse everybody else. I just want to make sure, yeah, we saw him. No, we haven't yet, but I want to make sure Chris has to read the reason we're going to executive session. Yeah. So if you could do that,
Okay,
please.
So we have a motion to go into executive session for the following discussion. Pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes, paragraph 1-206D, for discussion of the lease of real estate by the town when publicity, is that what it is? Publicity regarding such lease would
Yeah.
adversely impact the price of such lease.
That's why we're going to executive session for publicity.
The second,
Motion,
well, I just made the motion.
second. Yep, James, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none. We are in executive session. Tell me when you're ready. Now we can adjourn our regular meeting. Everybody? I'll keep it. Okay. That is it for tonight. I don't think we have anything else to cover, so I'll wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in December, and budget season kicks off in January, and off we go.
Yep.
All right, thank you all. Okay, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Chris, second. James? James, oh, James jumped you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none? Thank you.